You are listening to Season 2, Episode 32 of the Faith Over Breakfast podcast. Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Eric Seepin. I'm sitting across from, Andy Littleton from Mission Church. And Mike, what is your last name? Almeroth. Yes, thank you. Mike Almeroth, who is really the guy who runs Mission Church, the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, the man behind all of our... Every time something sounds okay...
If it sounds good,
it was Mike.
Mike was around.
Yeah, and if it looks good, it was Mike.
If it's crazy, it was Nick. If it's calm,
if it's a good idea, but maybe not as good executed, it's probably Andy. We were talking. We didn't talk about.
What?
We were at the pool hall the other night.
Yeah.
We're looking at our playing styles and saying, what does this say about this person's leadership?
There you go. There you go.
Andy goes up to the shot and he's like, pretty sure about the shot he's going to go for. Very, pretty confident that it could probably work, and then just goes for it. And then,
sometimes it works.
About 30% of them, work or look pretty good, and then a lot of them are just that was really, bad.
I'm not destroyed by that. I just walk away. I'm like,
yeah, he's fine. Yeah, he's fine with it.
What about Mike? What's Mike's pool style?
I don't know. Did we come up with mine?
Yeah, you were. Yeah, I mean, you had a kind of an interesting form all your own. Made a high amount of the shots. I felt sometimes. I was just like, how in the world did that even happen? And then...
So he's like that NBA player with the weird shot. You're like, wow, that's an interesting shot, but it goes in. And
When I play basketball, that is kind of how it happens.
Yeah. And then Nick is super you walk up, you're like, this guy's going to nail this, and then misses it and goes, oh well.
And then laughs.
Yeah. And then Ray...
But all of his shots are power shots.
Power shots. Absolutely. Yeah, I try to do finesse and stuff, and then, whoops. Or I'm going to put some backspin on that. And then sometimes it works really well. And other times off by a foot. And then Ray sets up and has perfect form and, moves the stick in about 30 times before taking the shot. And they usually go in.
Yeah.
And
but he doesn't go for the gusto.
No gusto. Phil? What was Phil's deal?
So this is a whole
This was our elders hangout the other day.
Hangout, okay.
Yeah. I don't remember what
Phil's was. Shoot, that says something.
Feels like I'm just cooler than all of you. That's what Phil is.
Yeah.
I was in a rock band. I'm older. I have kids.
Yeah. You guys would have to do this over board games, I assume. Yes, where you would learn about each other.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know. Rod doesn't play board games. He only plays Scrabble.
Well, that'll work. Yeah. Just all got to get together and play Scrabble and learn about each other.
I think it's actually pretty illuminating that we don't remember Phil's game, because that's kind of how he does it.
That's what I'm saying.
He's like, don't worry about me. And then he'll compliment you on your game, though.
Yeah. Yeah, he'll be like, oh, have you played pool for a long time? Yeah. That's really interesting. And you just kind of forget about what Phil did.
Nice.
There's something to that.
Uh-oh. Yeah. I hope none of these people listen to this podcast.
Yeah. Wait, was Andrew there at the pool game?
Yes.
He was. I know he was. I'm just because he's quieter.
Exactly. I did have to think about it, though.
Okay, well, this is we're jumping in here. This is what we're doing. We're going to give an intro already happened for you. We're all sitting here thinking, where are we going? But we're talking about leadership today.
We are.
And my name's Andy.
And I'm Eric.
And we've got Mike with us as well.
How's it going, everybody?
It's good to see you, Mike.
Yeah.
I don't get to see him very often. I see him in passing. It's like the mysterious Mike. Or
the mysterious Mike.
I see him on Facebook at whatever concert he's doing. There's a picture of him.
That's how I try to keep it. I only know most people in passing, and I like it that way.
Yeah, he's a social media figure more than anything else.
Right.
Few people know the man. But here he is. Here he is today with us. I mean, and you all have seen him on social media. Everyone in the world, those of you in Japan, you know who we're talking about here. But you know, here you get to hear his voice and hear some of his thoughts. So Mike's really here to teach us how to use the soundboard so we don't goof it up like the last podcast. And we're sorry about that one. That sounded like trash. But he's here just to, you know, show us how to turn a knob and push a button and stuff. And he gave me a really nice long note. It reminded me, like, it's more thorough than my mother, I think. My mom used to give me some notes, you know, remember, you know, do your homework. This was really good. This is a good note.
This is a thorough sound guy checklist.
Yeah.
To make sure you always get every piece of it right, because all the pieces matter.
Yes. And it's coming through. It's a good note.
Yeah,
so far so good.
It sounds really pretty.
It sounds really pretty. So we're going to talk about leadership.
Yeah,
actually.
because I wanted to do a leadership podcast. In fact, I have this idea that we could do like the 10-minute leadership podcast of Faith Over Breakfast. Just because every time, you know, because everyone else is doing it, and we need to jump on the bandwagon.
Is that what you call leadership?
It is. This is my way of leading. Wherever the bandwagon goes, we need to jump on it.
A little, like 10 years later.
10 years later.
Yeah. Okay. That's typical church for you right there.
Right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you know, our leadership podcast was one of our higher listened to podcasts. You just have to put leadership in. It doesn't matter what we're talking about.
Yeah. I feel like I need to talk to all our listeners about that. I mean, come on. The leadership podcast, the worship music podcast, get into something a little more high culture.
Well, you know, Rob Bell podcast is moving up.
So. Is it? Well, that one I'm okay with. Yeah.
Titles matter, you know.
Titles do matter.
They do.
Eric and I just drank coffee in sync, and that was really special. So here's the thing. So, and we did discuss this, and I kind of pushed back because I said, we're not really like those leadership guys with principles. And you said, exactly. That's why we should talk about it, because we're not that way, because we're different. So, and then the quick conversation, part of why I just told Mike to jump in, you know, leadership. And he's like, he did it. Look, it worked.
He followed you.
Yeah. Crazy. But it's because he's in my organization, and I don't know what my leadership style is.
There
I don't know if I have one.
Is a leadership style, because now you're talking about your organization. I've known you a long time. You have never said he is part of my organization.
I didn't know what else to say. That wasn't weird.
I think from what I heard, rumors I think he's an actual pastor and elder at your church.
He's an elder. The title is creative director.
Creative director.
I mean, yeah.
I like to think of it as my organization.
Yeah. Mike has been doing it longer in the technical organization.
Right. He pulls the strings.
Look, all I was trying to express was that I take ownership of what we do, okay? And it doesn't mean I'm the only one.
Right,
Our organization.
Yes. So let's talk about that leadership.
Jesus' organization.
Jesus' organization. People are already tuned out.
Yeah, this podcast is done. So what I want to discover today what my leadership style is, but you know what yours is because you always have very deep thoughts about these things. So tell me about your leadership style.
I don't know if I have a leadership style.
Oh man,
people would say it's authoritarian.
Yeah,
you know, dictator.
I mean, this is a joke, but for real though, a little bit.
A little bit. Well, I mean, yeah, there's the head of the organization.
Right.
I have some of those parts of that organization.
Yeah. But I mean, Rod, your co-pastor, would say that...
Well, I have another full-time co-pastor.
Yeah. But he says that you... Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yes, true. But Rod, who's been at it with you for a long time...
Yeah.
He will say that you are the one who's defined the village.
Yes.
Yeah. So... Yeah, so you're a dictator.
I am.
So how have you done it?
How have I done that?
How have you caused these people to follow your every word?
This is good. Can we redo this podcast?
No.
Here's the thing. I don't think it's easy for any person to say, this is my leadership style. You should have probably other people tell you what yours is.
Yeah.
So really what we should have done is bring in one of his people too.
Probably Mark or somebody.
Yeah, somebody should go sit here at the mic. But we don't provide a fourth mic, so...
We have one.
We have it. It's just sitting on the floor over there somewhere probably.
Yeah, well...
Okay, so if... but imagine, and let's imagine what you think. How you try to lead?
Well, I mean, I think any leader. I mean, leading means you have followers. That means people want to be around you and do the things that you're doing and follow.
That's the main ingredient, right?
Some set of your direction as you know, and in the church, it's sort of as you attempt to follow Jesus and invite people in that direction.
Yeah.
I think there are, to just talk about leadership, there are 3 types of leaders in my mind.
Okay.
There are people who have lots and lots of ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and people like being around them because they're really creative.
Yeah.
But they never get anything done because they are all about ideas.
Yeah.
And they're ideas that nobody else is thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that leader.
Yeah.
Then there's a leader who has no ideas, but they are like A to B. Like they take the ideas of other people and they can do them so much better than those people who have ideas.
You might say.
Yeah, they maximize. They tend to be people who love to go do it. So what are we going to do? How are we going to do that? What's the logistics of all those things? Let's get all the details down.
Yeah.
And
They make like documents on how to run your podcast.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And they can take somebody else's vision and then expand it.
Yeah.
And make it not even look like that person's vision.
Right.
You know, but you can see where it came from, but they are really good at then creating the space for it. And then the third kind of leader is the crisis-oriented leader. Everything's going bad, and he steps in, and he takes control, and he makes everything work, but then nobody wants to follow him after everything is calm.
Yeah.
Like, he has to lead.
I was just listening to something about, oh gosh, this is going to show how much I don't know about politics. I don't remember the name. I don't remember the title. But some guy that led us out of a conflict, perhaps in Bosnia.
Okay.
Would that be accurate? But it was on public radio yesterday, and they basically said that, you know, in most other situations you don't want to follow this guy, but he had what it took like to get us out of a crisis.
Right.
But then outside of that, you might not want to. He would never be the president.
Right.
You got to have some kind of panache.
Yes.
Where people are like, I'm going to follow that guy.
Right.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Right. The charisma.
Yeah.
Yeah. Confidence. Yeah, it's funny. Like, we'll follow people who, I mean, that's like the Firefest documentary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, well,
Yep.
Have you heard about this?
No,
or
I
watched
haven't.
This? Basically this guy, just advertised this crazy, amazing festival with beautiful women on a Bahamian island that they bought and all this stuff.
I saw the like little Netflix.
Yeah, and all these great bands. And the trouble was he advertised it before he had anything figured out.
Or the money to do so.
Or the actual. He figured he'd blow up the big idea and then figure it out. And it bombed. Yeah,
Wow.
big time. Yeah. And but people are still sort of following him now.
Well, the thing he did really well.
Yeah.
Was get hype.
Oh,
he knew how to build something up and make people want it.
Oh yeah.
So if you had the type of personality where he could be on a team, and an executive team, and he's the marketing guy, he's like the hype guy, he could do great things. But that also means he would have had to submit to the group, the leadership of the group, and listen when people say, "Hey, well, that we can't do this thing."
Yeah,
people were telling him that a lot.
They were. I was gonna say he kind of had a team, but they all, at the end of the day, they just sort of went, "Okay," and like, and he just plowed and
blew it all up.
Wow.
Yeah,
I'll have to go watch it.
It's an interesting study in a lot of things. Leadership, human nature. Yeah, It is.
So there was one on Hulu and one on Netflix that dropped at the same time.
Yeah. I watched the Netflix one.
The Netflix one was kind of big picture.
Yeah.
The Hulu one ended up doing more interviews with the guy, Billy something or other. I forget his last name. But that one, you really get a picture into who this guy is and how, like, there's no reason he should have had any plausible deniability as to how bad this thing was going to fail.
Right.
You can see as he's asked these questions that are specifically pointing out these turning points where he could have turned back. And even you can see that even he's still in denial that it was really a failure. Like, well, it was almost there. We just needed to do this.
Right.
And he's going to go out and do it again.
Oh,
which is why.
He's doing something. Like immediately after he was released from, wasn't he arrested?
Yeah.
And then immediately after he's released, he's got some new pretty much scam going.
Well, I think
selling.
If I remember
tickets.
correctly, he started doing it while he was still in jail, just with somebody else running it for
That's
him.
probably right. Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
How they pull those things
I'm
off.
dripping off. What's going on with my
You
coffee?
got coffee problems.
Dude, it's dripping on me everywhere. Anyway, my pants are just gonna be like speckled. I'm gonna be a cheetah.
That's okay.
Okay, so there's those.
Yeah, there's the styles of leadership that affect the kind of leader. I mean, if your whole leadership team is people who have lots of ideas, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah. That's
That's
why we have elders with no ideas.
No, here's what happened. Here's what happens at Mission Church. Nick has a ton of ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
Andy has a decent amount of ideas.
I've got some ideas.
And I have to go, wait, guys, stop. Hold up. How are we going to actually do these things and do them well? Like, let's cut about 80% of those ideas and just try to do these ones. Let's first try to do the things that we're already doing, and let's do those ones better.
Yeah.
And then we'll maybe have more actual budget to like do these other things. But that's just usually been my role throughout life anyways.
Yeah.
Stop worry about the details. And honestly, without guys like Nick and Andy, I don't venture out as far because I stay in the details. I'm like the guy behind the curtain at the Wizard of Oz. And I guess that in this scenario, I'm making you guys a fake entity.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
That's what's going on.
I knew there was something wrong in Mission Church.
Yeah.
It's a
And
fake
the pastors don't exist. No. That was a bad analogy. But yeah, basically, I'm the
You're more the detailed A to B. How are we going to do this? Let me kind of help you.
maybe the voice of caution. Yeah, I have ideas in the.
That, like there's a spectrum.
Oh, sure.
Mike's in the middle. He has ideas, but is very wary of a lot of ideas as well. And then I think we have elders who probably come to the meeting with 0 ideas every single time.
Yeah.
But that's good too. But they also are always kind of asking the question of, so why are we doing that? Is that really feasible, or just saying no? Right.
That would be Ray.
Yeah.
Andrew doesn't come with any ideas and doesn't have that much caution, and he kind of just is like the even keel, neutral guy.
Yeah, Ray is always prone to just be like, why are we doing this? Yeah.
Exactly.
But then he'll come around. He'll come around sometime.
Well, it's good to have those kind of guys.
Yeah.
It's good to have guys who are willing to question everything.
Yeah.
Say, why are we doing this? What's going on?
Yes.
So maybe but you the village was a 2-elder situation, and then you kind of had a leadership team.
Yes.
And
well, we had 2 elders. What everybody else would call elders and deacons. Yes.
Okay, sure. And you called them like
Well, we
hold
call
on,
them-
no. Let me make up what you call them.
No.
You called them like I mean, you actually have pilgrim groups and
we called them We called them tribal elders because we're the village.
That's it.
And we called them lead ministers.
Yeah, chiefs and
And we didn't call them chiefs.
headdresses,
all that kind of stuff. Yes. Well, hey, it was the turn of the century. It was the village.
Yeah, it was.
We were hip at the time.
It's 2019. You can't do that anymore.
I know we can't do those things.
You got to do what we do and
in the age
name everything the most boring
in
possible.
the age of
name.
cultural appropriation, you can no longer go with a Native American theme.
Right. So we're just elders and lead ministers.
Okay. Wow, that sounds very you.
Yeah, very, very yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But, I mean, I think what I was hoping to talk about, I don't know, leadership styles. That's nice. I don't know what Andy's leadership styles are.
I don't either.
But I wonder what does it look like to lead in the context of community? What does it look like to lead? Not necessarily to figure out how are we going to grow? How are we going to fill the seats? How are we going to, have the perfect thing that you can come consume? Because I think a lot of leadership is built in church-wise, and because they're modeling it after business.
Creating excellent environments.
Excellent environments to be consumed. I don't think excellence is a bad thing, but when it's built for consumption, then I think that's a problem.
Being an excellent right? An excellent family might not be a perfect-looking one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you lead, as broken people, with some authenticity and with some vulnerability. That's what I was hoping to talk about.
Okay. You've read Dan Allender.
Yeah, I have read Dan Allender.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
So what do you think about it? Like, so what does that look like at Mission Church? How do you guys lead in authenticity and vulnerability? What would that look like in the community itself?
Yeah. Interestingly, I'd be interested to hear what Mike thinks on this, but I think Nick and I both, as the more vocal two, I mean, I've heard people say that we kind of degrade ourselves publicly sometimes, that we're the vulnerability and stuff like that. Like, we're always, this is, at least I've heard this, that we're always talking about how we don't understand and don't get it and don't know what to do. And people are kind of going, "Oh, I think you do more than you think." I don't know what.
Yeah, well, that is a young leader's kind of thing to do.
Is it? Yeah. Okay.
But well, it's easier. I think probably, but as people, you and Nick both have a kind of self-deprecation strategy, maybe for self-protection.
Yeah, sure.
And
now who's read Dan Allender and Larry?
But
right.
But hey, I mean, also, it's not just that. It comes from also when we were talking about our anti-values, when we were first beginning putting the church together, that was really one of them, right? It was we want humility to be something that is permeating the culture.
Right.
We don't want anthropomorphic church. We don't want people as the leader that everyone looks to, and that's why this church exists, and once they're gone, it's over.
Right.
And so those things interplay for sure. And sometimes it is done really well, and sometimes it's more of an excuse, and sometimes but if you're a leader, you're going to have stuff like that no matter what.
Yeah. So I guess if anything, though, we've embraced the leading with a limp idea of, and that's Allender's book title, right? But the that idea of not trying to prop ourselves up as doing everything well and better, but and Mike's right, we definitely use it as a mechanism when we're feeling unsure about ourselves, when sometimes we should just go and say, we're doing this, and this is
right.
And sometimes sometimes we've been able to foresee that coming and address it and kind of stand with confidence, even though we don't feel like it. But then other times we've admitted, like kind of recently when we had our big drain pipe issue and money was tight, we discussed how we were going to approach that. And we were all nervous about talking about money. And we're like, well, then why don't we tell everybody that we're nervous about talking about this? And instead of just pushing through it, I get up and say, hey, so it's uncomfortable. We don't like asking for money, and we don't like being seen as, poor stewards of money. And so we're not just excited to tell you this, but at the same time, this is really important. And we had genuine, things break here at the church, and money's low.
Right.
So we would really just encourage you to help out with that. And if you're able, so kind of trying to lead from that perspective.
Yeah. I have this whole backlog of ideas for little mini books that I want to write to just get all these ideas out of my brain, like little like 200-pager, a little 120-pager. But one of them is on leadership, and I want to address. There's this thing that happens in leadership where you, as a leader, you kind of receive this title that puts you in a place where you're looked upon by other people as the person that is supposed to have it all figured out, right?
Right.
Which is a horrible place to put any human in, because we tend to either try to rise to the challenge, uphold the standard, and then when inevitably our abilities fall below that standard, we have a few choices on how to maintain our leadership, and a lot of times they're self-protective and are going to make things worse.
Sure.
And that's not just a problem with the person in the position of leadership. It's also a problem of how we perceive leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the Bible, I think that's one of the reasons it consistently shows the people God's putting in power are maybe some of the worst people. But he's putting them there because they are willing to be led. They're willing to be broken. They're the ones that are going to go back and look to God. And ultimately, even if God has to crush them, basically, right?
Sure.
But they're the ones that are going to turn back and say, all right, God, what do you want here?
That's one of the interesting things that you see in the Bible, and I can't say I've read all the ancient documents of other cultures, but it seems like a lot of ancient documents are trying to promote almost the godlike side of leaders, and something about the Bible that's I think really unique is it almost goes out of its way to expose the sins of leaders that you could very easily have skipped over. Like some of those sins, they hardly made a mark on the guy's legacy in a way. Like you could have just left it out of the history books. But it seems like the Bible goes out of the way, and God goes out of the way to show people the faults of the leaders. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I remembered the title of that book, by the way.
Oh.
Look for it in 2029.
2029.
It's called The Hierarchy of Holiness.
The Hierarchy of Holiness. So I'll look for it when
look at Mike and all his ideas.
56 years old.
Yeah,
I'll be reading that book.
It's never going to happen because I'm just going to think about all the things that could go wrong and never write it.
Nick just started a publishing company. He'll push it through.
Yeah.
Right.
It's done or not.
One of his ideas. I think like what I've learned as a leader, and I've been doing this for like 25 years, leading people, is that vulnerability, like when you talk about money, when you talk about what you want the community to, where you want it to go, there's two kinds of vulnerability. You can say, well, we're really scared, which is a good one, but a lot of times what people are looking for is for you to lead them, but they don't want you to say, all right, everybody, we need to do this, and we're going to get up here and do this. They want to know that it's deeply important to you and that you're in need. Because they always see you as somebody who's trying to help them or engage them, and they want to know that they actually can help you. And so a lot of times, especially in the community, when it comes around money, I mean, our experience has been that people start going, oh, I just didn't know you needed this. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we just don't. We encourage people, tell us your needs. Be vulnerable. But as leaders, as a community, we don't tend to say, "Oh, but we're in need."
Yeah, I've heard that a lot, and is that people will say that their perception of me is I don't need anything.
Yes,
and I definitely don't feel that way at all. But for whatever reason, I give that off, I guess.
Yeah. And maybe that's just something that comes with leadership personalities. We don't tend to be the type of people that like to be in need.
No,
we like to provide for needs.
I like people to provide for my needs.
Well, you're different in that way.
Yeah,
you love getting stuff for free. You love finding a great deal.
Yeah,
you're not afraid to ask for stuff, but it depends on what the stuff is.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think people are hoping that you'll be needy in the way that they are.
Yes.
That they could speak a word to you of encouragement or correction or fulfill like that. I think there's some hope for that. That's not always a hierarchy, but that it's flattened a little bit, especially in communal church, where it's not like people come and they just see Andy on a platform and Mike on a platform, and they're kind of not touchable. And not engageable.
That's why we don't have a platform, but it's not working. It hasn't fixed this problem.
You mean a stage?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean by a platform?
Yeah.
We don't have a platform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we do have
so then
podium.
what are the ways that you encourage people to approach you in correction? What are the ways you encourage, where you open the door and say, I need...
Well, I think the thing that I talk about in a lot of church is that most people, like, first you just invite it. Like, you invite it. And then I've said a lot from up front is that, people are going to offer me things and they're probably 70% wrong. I've just told them you're going to be wrong.
Right.
But what I'm looking for is the 30% of where you're going to be right. So you should talk to me. You should offer. So I get correction a lot of the village. People always like, hey, I think you're, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I listen and I don't push back on that. So they feel like they're free to offer those things. In the context of leadership, like a leadership community, well, they have a much deeper impact in their ability. But we're in some ways trying to live our lives out together as we lead people.
Yeah.
And so there's that kind of vulnerability.
An interesting thing does occur, and that is that I tend to get offered leadership from people who don't know me very well a lot. I had a guy call on the phone the other day who has never been to our church and proceeded to give me all kinds of pre-feedback for how he was going to assess my preaching.
Wow, I've never gotten that. This is cool. How did this?
He called and announced he's an ex-professor at NYU looking for a church in Tucson, and started asking me all these questions, and then told me, like, I will assess you based on this, and this, and give you my feedback at the end of your sermon. And he has not come. I pushed back on him.
Good.
On the phone, yeah. And it was different. It was a new one. But also, like, first-time visitors or people who don't know me very well, I've gotten a lot of feedback from, and those are the ones where it's like, I have sin and motivations, but you don't know a thing about them. It's the people that I would, it's the people who are closest to me who know those things well that I think I would love to hear more of that from, who sometimes don't offer it. Sometimes do. But sometimes
because
don't.
It costs more.
Because you're close. Yeah.
So what do you think? So I don't know, like, the average age of your church, but our church is like solidly in the millennial age
mostly
group.
for
So
us
we're
too.
talking like early 30s, and then we have older and younger, but the big chunk is millennials.
Same.
We're a little bit.
I think
We're a little bit below that.
Yeah, I think you're slightly younger.
Close.
I
Probably
think our
25 to
median age is
30.
25.
Yeah, and I'd say ours is 30.
Yeah.
31. So why do you think people that age are following you guys?
Yeah.
What is it about the way you lead and shape community that they're not going over to, any other church?
Yeah. Good question. I think part of it, I think there are several reasons, but I think one of them might be that humility piece, because it tends to be that when we talk with a lot of conviction, it's about being humble. So, I mean, like, we'll get, and it's interesting because we're being very strong on that point, but we'll get very strong on the point of being humble, not seeing yourself as better than, not missing the log in your eye. That kind of stuff is where we speak with a lot of conviction. So I would think that people who are longing to hear that are hearing it with a lot of passion from us.
Yeah, I think it's that, and we're a church that is very community oriented. So I think there are a lot of churches where 10% of the people do 90% of the work. That's kind of just a rule at churches. Yeah. We're probably a church where 50% of the people do 90% of the work.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of people that like to be hands-on, that like to belong somewhere because they're doing something there.
Yeah, people who like to be in the game, I think, tend to like our church.
But also, a differentiating characteristic of our church, I think, is probably that we're not a picture of a normal church, and people that come to our church appreciate that. I think that's what a lot of people see when they come to mission churches. We don't really have the typical Christian cultural platitudes. We don't follow the same rules. We don't have the same things happening in our service. We're reflecting Christianity in just a different way that maybe resonates with them more individually. And it's not that it's wrong that other churches do it that way, but personally, for me, I'm just kind of so over that. I'm just so over the pastor telling you to stand up and meet your neighbor and tell them something that's encouraging.
Oh gosh, thank you so much.
I'm so over walking in with somebody that has a name tag on, shaking my hand and telling me where the donuts are. I'm just, if it feels like
contrived.
The same,
Some-
if it feels like the same contrived Christian culture that I grew up in, I'm turned off to it, probably for good and bad reasons.
Sure.
I'm similar. I like anytime something comes up that feels remotely like standard church. Even our church isn't that different, truthfully, but I'm always, my little radar goes up and I'm like, I don't want to do it.
Even down to the chairs that we were given for free.
Yeah.
They're almost like this brown, semi like argyle pattern.
Yeah.
That looks very much like church chairs.
Yeah.
That's where you see this kind of chair.
Yeah.
It's not anywhere else. It's
Right.
just at a church.
Yes.
And we were super grateful for those chairs, but it was like, okay, like it took a little, like,
I bet it took some emotional.
Like,
you had to spend some emotional.
it's like, this is thousands of dollars worth of perfect, very comfortable chairs. Like, we got to get over ourselves and take these chairs and sit in them and love them and enjoy them. But if we'd gone out looking for chairs, it would have been.
We actually hatched a scheme to start looking at a bunch of different Goodwills, find couches
and
that
like
we can put in between different sections and create
then,
little living room spaces.
Yep. And we kind of still want.
I'm still
that.
down to do it. Totally.
We were talking about little, like you're the center of your church is like the couches, and then you've got pews around the outside. We were almost going the opposite, like chairs in the middle and little living rooms all
sections,
around.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that like you guys lead, and I think the Village is this way too. You lead by environment. Like it's funny that environmental things are the values that you find like you're going to use to lead people. You walk in,
the feel
of things is really important to get people into a space where they can hear Jesus speak. That's part of the leadership. Like environment being an important thing. Like where you place your value system. That makes things different.
Yeah, I mean, your leadership comes out in the way that you talk to people. It comes out in the environment that you create. It comes out in the kind of meeting that you run, which I'm sure frustrates some of our folks to no end. You know, but we're not corporate at all. I mean, even if I think about the type of meeting that I run is the type that other people tend to take over a lot. Like somebody will be like, "Can I take over this meeting?" I'm like, "Sure, go for it." You know, but it's not corporate. It's not like, "Hey, everybody, listen to me. We're going from A to B right now, and we're going to get there in 30 minutes, and then we're going to be off and back to work." Like that's just not how I operate.
Right, and I would say at the Village, we actually run pretty tight meetings, because we have so many families.
Yeah.
So like our leadership meeting, we meet once a month for 2.5 hours, and it's very planned. But
we all have nothing to do.
But we don't make any decisions about the institution.
Yeah.
Most of the time, we are wrestling with people. So we're praying over people. We're talking about what's happening in people's lives, or we're training to work with people.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing is built around people.
That's good.
We do have elder meetings twice a month that are an hour long, and we make some decisions in those, you know, and have more, you know, decision-oriented conversations.
I'm just going to go ahead and say our elders and staff shouldn't listen to this podcast because it's going to frustrate them that our meetings are all triple that length. But
and weekly.
Not elders.
I did just identify another unifying characteristic that seems to be going across all of our leadership, which would be we all kind of have an entrepreneurial bent, but that may be largely leaning on not wanting to have authority over us.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that's a unifying... It's funny because I think both of our churches have kind of wrestled with that and tried to make moves to counter it. But, you know, knowing your story, Eric, and a lot of ours, I mean, we all struggled with the authority structures, right?
Well, and the weird part of my story, like when I was in college, I was at Mike's house, so hanging out with his parents.
Yeah.
So all of our stories are intertwined.
Everything makes so much more sense.
So then I'm thinking these things. There's a culture where there's an airplane
Speaking of leadership,
it's the nice part of this podcast. Is you get an airplane,
get a break.
you get a car.
Some podcasts are so boring. Like, oh, it's all nice and quiet, and they're talking. We got an airplane. We're in the flight path. Somebody led America to have. Do you realize in Tucson, Arizona, we have more airplanes than any military in the world that are inactive. Our inactive planes in Tucson are larger than any fleet.
You wouldn't be able to tell by how often you hear the noise above your head.
Well, I mean, that's our active ones. Our boneyard is bigger than. It's wild. Leadership.
Anyway, and Mike was just about to lay on something really important.
Mike, lay it on.
So, how much of this, say, people listening to the leadership podcast a lot, how much of that do you think is because of the kind of self-help mentality that seems to permeate Christian culture? Like your best life now. Almost the Joel Osteen aspect of Christianity.
Did you just say people doing leadership podcasts are like Joel Osteen? I like that.
I think you extrapolated that.
Well, I think that like we worship the big institution. So like I want to know what the CEO of Coke has to say about leading. I want to know what the CEO of Home Depot, or I want to know what Andy Stanley has to say. Because he's got 20,000 people in his church. So I want to know because hey, I'm this little guy trying to figure it out, and he's got the 5 things. You do this, and you have teams that, and then he has a phrase, and you're like, oh yeah, we need to have teams that are authentic, and they do X, Y, and Z, and so you go do that.
See, it's funny because I do think that appeals to a large, swath of society, but I think there's a group, a huge group that I think at least our church cares about a lot that just doesn't resonate with that at all. But also does resonate with leadership. So I listened to How I Built This about Burt's Bees. You've heard that. Mm-hmm. So I loved it. It's probably one of my favorite ones I've ever heard. But here's the thing. Burt's Bees was essentially started on accident through a whole bunch of interesting, you never could have planned it events in which a lady ends up moving out into the woods with her boyfriend, and then it doesn't work out, and she's by herself in the woods with her kids and meets this guy named Bert who has a bunch of beehives and is just kind of grumpy, and then they end up selling more honey because she has a few ideas, and it just all grows, and then she and Bert fall in love even though he's super old, and then that doesn't work out, and Bert gets mad and leaves the company, and she ends up this just super billionaire and looks back on it all and just goes, what happened? But I found it really interesting because she did have really great ideas that led to, and then there were just a lot of like happenstance things like, oh, we were selling honey bears here, and some store from New York wanted something we made, and then we got bigger, and then we tried this, and then we tried chapstick, and guess what? So I get inspired by people who have great ideas who aren't on this like path to win. Like that's what I loved about her. She wasn't on a path to win, and she did. Like she just had good ideas. So I wonder how many people in our church like are kind of repulsed by the people that have a plan to win, but they still like people that have good ideas, and they still are attracted. I don't know. I think different. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I hope that people aren't repulsed. That would be
by people, your path to win.
By my path to win. It's weird because no matter where you are relationally in like Mission Church or the Village, you do want to be successful.
Yeah.
You want to see people come to Christ. You want to see people's lives transformed. Yeah. You want to go to. You don't want to stand up in front of 2 people and speak. You want to speak to more people. You want to have an influence.
But success looks different.
Sure.
Yeah. It's what's the vision
right.
like that, and that. So now we're starting to sound like a leadership podcast. But like the vision that you that you have is what you're shooting for. And the vision we've talked about are these small churches in which everybody knows each other and can speak into the life of the leader. And that's the vision.
Right.
Yeah. Rather than the church that dwarfs all college stadiums or whatever,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to me why you really loved that story. Mm-hmm. Because you really like, one, I've noticed that you don't like giving things people that they want. You like giving things people that you think they deserve and they don't ask for it.
Sure.
And that's probably, it's got all its own good and bad motivations probably.
Like giving awards to people that aren't looking for
exactly.
them. Yeah, that are kind of uncomfortable with getting it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want people to not want it.
Right.
And then you'll give it to them.
Uh-oh, you've been outed. And now people
and
are...
also,
there's some truth.
Yeah, so if you want something from Andy, pretend like you don't want
it.
But make sure he knows that you need it.
Right.
Kind of nothing bugs me more than somebody that wants a certain thing and is just like...
pushing for it.
Yeah, like, I want to be the pastor of the church. I'm like, you're never going to be a pastor of this church. And somebody's like, I don't think I could ever lead ever. You're our next pastor. It's you.
Yeah. And then secondly, I think you also really like the idea of something like that lady.
Yeah.
She wasn't trying to do anything good, but it just kind of just happened.
Right.
And I mean, that's reflected in the way we run our church. It's like we really are. I think we all really have the best of intentions.
Yeah.
I think we all really want to just do the right thing. We want to have a ministry that is founded on the right principles and operates on them. But probably we fail to do the things as well as we could because we don't put enough application and we don't put enough structure into it sometimes. And a lot of it is because we don't have the staff to actually do that.
Right.
But
we also give our time elsewhere.
Yeah. Pros and cons.
Like
Right,
I would much rather, this is just honest truth. I love having just fun conversations with people. And if I had to sacrifice those and make every meeting 30 minutes and we couldn't go off on some little tangent that was kind of interesting, like, it just kill me.
Fun, no.
Just kill me. Like, no. And so I'm sure we could spend that time being more strategic and do a more excellent job. But to me, it would just be like pain.
Yeah.
So
I think too, like, I mean, obviously the village is a little further ahead of you guys in just length of time being in existence. And we were that way too. And we're not 30 minutes. I mean, but I think what happened, I mean, children changed everything for us.
It's true.
It's just like, oh, well, this person can't be here because they don't have a babysitter.
Right.
Oh, so we got to arrange babysitters, help them find, because we're not just arranging one babysitter for somebody. Everybody's trying to pull from the same pool to get a babysitter.
Yeah.
And now there's like 5-6 kids that have to be babysat. And so, there's children just change everything in meetings, the way your church looks.
Yeah.
Like we used to preach for about an hour.
Yeah.
Now we preach 30 minutes because the kid volunteers are like, I can't do this for 2 hours, guys. I can't, And worship is, we're playing 8 songs and we're not doing that. Oh, let's just do this again,
Like no, let's finish it up.
No, we have to, because the poor nursery worker and it's got 6 babies screaming and then they can't do that for 2 hours. So that changed. It was interesting to see it change the dynamics. Mm-hmm. It was a hard adjustment for us.
That's the phase we're entering into.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got,
shift.
We don't have, you've got all the other kids' rooms. We just have, it feels like babies, just like people are having babies.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep, I remember that.
Yep. Yeah, that's a thing.
It is a thing.
Yep.
It's fun.
Yeah, no. Oh, it's good news for us because I think both of our churches, like especially Epicenter, it was like you would have these young people, and then when they got to that stage of families, they went somewhere else sometimes, or they wasn't.
A couple of times, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's good news that we have families with kids that are calling our church home. It means we're moving with people, right? But it's different. Yeah.
Right.
It's very different. Well, 45 minutes. That was the best leadership podcast I've ever listened to tell you the truth. There were very few actual tangible things to do.
Maybe
I learned a little more about you guys. And
How many leadership podcasts have you listened to?
A
like
lot.
4, I was going to say. Yeah.
I've listened to a lot. I listen to them as a hobby.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I do not listen to them as a hobby.
That's
ever.
very fascinating. I mean, I like how organizations are like put together, how people, can do something and get people to come around an idea. I mean, I think that's a cool thing.
No, yeah. It's cool. And I know it's happening. We had a Gospel Coalition meeting the other day where one of the pastors here in town was talking about building a culture in your church. And the statement that he made that was very true that I don't always think about is he said, we're all building one.
Right, all the time.
Every one of you is building one. What is it? You just have to decide what it is. And that kind of, as I've been milling on that and going, I am creating one. And we all are creating one, and we just maybe need to understand what it is. And then maybe some things do need to change. And maybe some of the things we're doing, we need to actually name them and be more on purpose with them.
Sure. Well, and even though you guys are on the younger end, you kind of act a little like Xers. And so you kind of are like,
that's good.
Whatever. Like you kind of have a little angstiness to you instead of the millennial, woo, we could
Zeal.
do this. Everything can happen. We could go.
I'm going to start a company and change the world.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you're that way, but I just don't get that vibe from the two of you.
I think I was more that way at the beginning of Epicenter. And then the reality of leadership sets in.
Right, and then you just become cynical. Right?
You're like, nobody wants to help do anything. Nobody really actually cares about the stuff they say they care about. They just want you to do it.
Right.
My parents were a generation older than all my friends' parents. Right. And I think something about that just, some would go on and, my mom would be like, well, I mean, the Great Depression,
Right.
None of my friends' parents were bringing up the Great Depression.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I did want to say, I don't want to mock millennials because my entire church is full of them. And I love them to death. And they're not,
It's okay. Everybody else does it. We're used to it.